The sun has set over ancient Athens, and the marble steps of the Acropolis are empty except for a few stray cats. Down in the narrow streets below, oil lamps flicker to life in windows, casting dancing shadows on mud brick walls. The day's work is done, the agora is closing, and thousands of tired Greeks are about to do what tired people have always done: find somewhere to drink. But forget everything you think you know about ancient Greek drinking culture. This isn't going to be some refined symposium with philosophers lounging on couches, debating the nature of existence while servants pour wine from silver vessels. That's the ancient Greek equivalent of assuming everyone today drinks champagne at yacht clubs. The truth is far more interesting and infinitely more relatable. After a long day of hauling stones, making pottery, or arguing in the courts, ordinary ancient Greeks headed to places called Capilea. These were the neighborhood taverns where democracy really happened, where social barriers crumbled faster than week-old bread, and where the real spirit of ancient Greece came alive through shared drinks and shared misery. These taverns were so common, so essential to daily life, that they practically defined what it meant to be an ordinary person in the ancient world. Yet they were also so looked down upon by the upper classes that archaeologists have spent centuries trying to prove they even existed. The wealthy wrote about symposiums. The poor just drank and left no records. Tonight, we're stepping into one of these lost worlds to see how the other 99% of ancient Greeks really lived, drank, and bonded over wine that could strip paint and company that would make your mother worry. Here's something that will blow your mind. Archaeologists have found plenty of evidence of fancy Greek symposiums, but they've never found a single Capillian. Not one. Despite knowing these taverns existed everywhere in ancient Athens, despite finding references to them in countless plays and writings, the actual buildings have vanished like they never existed. This isn't because they were rare or unimportant. As historian James Davidson put it, just as the common messes feed and water the entire citizenry in Sparta, so the whole population of Athens can be found of an evening thronging the Capilea. These places were packed every single night with the majority of Athens' population. The reason we can't find them reveals everything about ancient Greek social attitudes. While wealthy Greeks built their symposium rooms from marble and decorated them with expensive art, tavern owners used whatever materials were cheap and available. When the buildings crumbled, nobody bothered to preserve them as monuments. They were just replaced with new taverns, equally temporary and equally forgotten. But recent archaeological detective work has started to piece together what these places were really like. Researcher Claire Kelly-Blaseby from the University of Leeds found that some ancient Greek houses had yielded hundreds of drinking cups. Far too many even for well-off families hosting lavish parties. The most likely explanation? These homes doubled as taverns. If you're still here, go ahead and subscribe for more wild history. This discovery changes everything we thought we knew about ancient Greek drinking culture. The line between private homes and public drinking spaces was blurred beyond recognition. Your neighbor's house might transform into the local bar every evening, complete with all the chaos that entailed. You've just finished another brutal day in ancient Athens. Maybe you spent 14 hours in the pottery workshop, breathing clay dust and trying not to burn your fingers on the kiln. Maybe you were hauling stone blocks for some rich guy's new house, your back screaming and your hands bloody from rope burns. Or perhaps you were one of the lucky ones who got to argue legal cases in the agora. But even then, you're exhausted from shouting over crowds and dodging flying fruit from angry citizens. The point is, you're done. Your body hurts, your head hurts, and you need a drink. But this isn't modern times where you can just look up bars near me on your phone. There are no glowing neon signs, no Yelp reviews, and definitely no GPS to guide you to the nearest tavern. What you do have are your ears and your nose. Follow the sounds of laughter, shouting, and the occasional crash of pottery hitting the ground. The smell will hit you next. That distinctive mixture of fermented grapes, unwashed bodies, and cooking oil that signals civilization's most important gathering place. The Capillian might be tucked into the ground floor of someone's house, with nothing more than a clay lamp hanging outside to mark its presence. Or it could be a standalone building, sagging under the weight of too many repairs and too little money. Either way, you'll know it when you see it. The place where everyone goes when they want to forget about their problems. The entrance is usually just a doorway covered with a cloth or animal hide. Just step inside and hope you're ready for what you'll find. The moment you push through that cloth doorway, you're hit with a wall of sensation that would overwhelm any modern person. The air is thick with smoke from oil lamps, the scent of spilled wine, and the unmistakable aroma of too many people in too small a space. The ceiling is low, probably just high enough to clear your head if you're not too tall. And the floor is packed earth, worn smooth by countless feet over countless nights. There's no bar in the modern sense. Instead, you'll find clay amphorae lined up against the walls, their distinctive shapes telling you exactly where the wine came from. The pointed bottom of an amphora from Chios, the rounded belly of one from Lesbos, the elegant curve of a vessel from Thassos. Each region had its own style, and the tavern keeper knew them all. The wine was stored in these amphorae, and once opened, it would be decanted into a crater, cooled using a sicter or wine cooler which stood inside the crater, then served from oinochoai or olpai, and drunk from a variety of plain or decorated cup shapes, such as the kylix, kothon, and cantharos. The furniture is basic and functional. Rough wooden benches, maybe a few stools, and tables that have seen better decades. Everything is scarred from use, stained with wine, and probably held together with hope and prayer. The walls are bare except for the occasional piece of graffiti scratched into the plaster. Ancient Greeks loved their bathroom humor just as much as we do. But what really defines the Capilea is the people. This is where the magic happens, where ancient Greek society really comes alive. Unlike the private drinking parties hosted by the wealthy, most taverns were open to almost anyone, including women and slaves. The democracy that Athens was famous for happened every night in these taverns, where ordinary people gathered to argue, complain, celebrate, and commiserate. The Capilea was where public opinion was really formed, where gossip turned into political movements, where the pulse of the city could be felt in its rawest form. Ancient Greek wine wasn't like anything you'd recognize today. It was much stronger than modern wine and was always mixed with water, with 1 part wine to 3 parts water being the preferred mixture. Drinking unmixed wine was considered barbaric, something only uncivilized people did. Like today's wine, it came in 3 different types: austeros, dry, glucagon, sweet, and autokratos, medium sweet, and could be red, white, or rosé. But the similarities end there. Ancient wine was often flavored with herbs, spices, and even seawater. Some varieties were so thick they had to be strained before drinking. Others were so acidic that they could clean bronze. The mixing process was an art form in itself. Too much water and you'd be drinking flavored water that wouldn't get you drunk. Too little and you'd be on the floor before you knew what hit you. The tavern keeper had to judge each customer's tolerance, the strength of different wines, and the desired effect. The wine was served in various types of cups, each with its own purpose and social meaning. The kylix was the most common, a shallow, wide cup with 2 handles that was perfect for social drinking. The kothon was a military drinking cup, favoured by soldiers and tough guys. The cantharos was deeper and more elegant, often used for special occasions. But here's what made tavern drinking different from symposium drinking. The quality was questionable at best. While wealthy Greeks could afford the finest wines from the best vineyards, tavern wine was often the dregs, literally. It might be watered down beyond recognition, flavoured with questionable additives, or so old it had turned to vinegar. But it was cheap, it was available, and it did the job. Every ancient Greek tavern had its regular cast of characters, and getting to know them was part of the experience. The tavern keeper was the undisputed ruler of this small kingdom, usually a tough, weathered individual who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. They knew everyone's drinking habits, their debts, their secrets, and their limits. Cross them at your peril. Then there were the regulars, the local characters who treated the tavern like a second home. There was always the old soldier who fought in some famous battle and would tell you about it whether you wanted to hear it or not. The failed merchant who lost everything in a bad shipping deal now drowns his sorrows nightly. The young poet who thinks he's the next Sophocles and will recite his terrible verses to anyone who will listen. Women and slaves were said to go to drink at these places, creating a much more promiscuous atmosphere than the all-male symposiums of the wealthy. This social mixing was both the tavern's greatest appeal and its biggest scandal. Conservative Greeks were horrified by the idea of citizens drinking alongside slaves, of respectable women mingling with prostitutes, of social boundaries dissolving in wine and laughter. The slaves who frequented taverns were often skilled craftsmen, household servants, or shopkeepers who had been given some freedom of movement by their masters. They came to the tavern not just for the wine, but for the rare opportunity to socialize as equals, to forget their status for a few hours, to feel human rather than property. The women who drank in taverns were from all walks of life. Some were prostitutes, it's true, but others were merchants, artisans, freed slaves, or even citizens' wives looking for a break from domestic life. In a society where women's movements were heavily restricted, the tavern offered a rare space of relative freedom. Foreign visitors were another common sight. Merchants from other cities, travelers passing through, even barbarians from beyond the Greek world, all found their way to the neighborhood tavern. These outsiders brought news, stories, and different perspectives that enriched the tavern's atmosphere and kept the conversation flowing. In some tavern establishments, you could have something to eat as well. Tragimata, sweets, or hales, savories, which translated to bar snacks. But don't expect a full menu or gourmet cuisine. Tavern food was simple, cheap, and designed to keep you drinking rather than fill you up. The sweets were usually honey cakes, dried fruits, or nuts. The savory snacks might include olives, cheese, small fish, or bread. Everything was salty, designed to make you thirsty and keep you ordering more wine. The quality ranged from decent to questionable, and the hygiene standards were whatever the tavern keeper felt like maintaining that day. Some taverns had small kitchens where they could prepare hot food, usually simple stews, grilled fish, or roasted meat. But cooking facilities were expensive to maintain and dangerous in cramped spaces. So most taverns stuck to cold food that could be prepared elsewhere and brought in. The serving style was communal. Food was placed on the tables in shared bowls, and everyone ate with their hands or with simple utensils. Plates were often just pieces of bread that could be eaten after the meal. Cups were shared, wine was poured from common vessels, and personal hygiene was not a major concern. The entertainment in an ancient Greek tavern was whatever the customers provided. Just whatever emerged from the combination of alcohol, personality, and social dynamics. Music was common, but amateur. Someone would bring a lyre or flute, and anyone who thought they could play would give it a try. The results ranged from beautiful impromptu concerts to noises that would make dogs howl. Singing was even more common. Dancing happened, but it was the kind of dancing that only makes sense when you're drunk. Wild, uninhibited, and completely lacking in choreography. The floor would clear, someone would start gyrating to the music, and others would join in until the entire tavern was a mass of moving bodies and spilled wine. For all their social importance and community spirit, ancient Greek taverns had a dark side that modern sanitized versions tend to ignore. These were rough places where violence was common, where exploitation was normal, and where a night of drinking could easily turn into a life-changing disaster. Fights were a regular occurrence. Tavern fights could start over anything. A spilled drink, an insult, a disputed game, or just because someone looked at someone else the wrong way. Weapons were common, and serious injuries were not unusual. The social mixing that made taverns special also made them dangerous. Citizens who looked down on slaves and foreigners didn't suddenly become enlightened when they got drunk. Instead, alcohol often amplified existing prejudices and social tensions. A drunk citizen might decide to put a slave in their place, or a group of young men might target a foreign visitor for abuse. Sexual exploitation was another dark reality. The presence of women, slaves, and prostitutes in taverns created opportunities for abuse that were often overlooked or ignored. Drunk men felt entitled to take liberties, and the informal, chaotic atmosphere made it easy to get away with behavior that would be punished in other settings. Debt was a constant problem. Many tavern customers were poor, and the temptation to drink beyond their means was constant. Tavern keepers often allowed customers to run up tabs, but collection could be brutal. Debtors might be forced to work off their debts, have their property seized, or even be sold into slavery. Despite their rough reputation, ancient Greek taverns played a crucial role in the political life of the city. This was where ordinary citizens gathered to discuss the issues of the day. The formal democracy of the agora was just the tip of the iceberg. The real political action happened in the taverns. Running a tavern in ancient Greece was both an opportunity and a risk. On one hand, there was always a demand for alcohol and social gathering spaces. On the other hand, the business was highly competitive, poorly regulated, and subject to the whims of politics and economics. Most tavern keepers were ordinary people trying to make a living in a tough world. They might be former soldiers, failed merchants, or skilled craftsmen who saw an opportunity in the hospitality business. Some were women, widows, or freed slaves who needed income and had few other options. Others were families who converted part of their homes into drinking spaces to supplement their income. The economics were challenging. Wine had to be purchased from producers or merchants, often requiring significant upfront investment. Equipment like amphorae, cups, and serving vessels was expensive and easily broken. The space had to be maintained, lit, and heated. And customers were often poor, unreliable, or both. Pricing was informal and flexible. Regular customers might run tabs, friends might drink for free, and prices might vary depending on the tavern keeper's mood or the customer's ability to pay. This flexibility was part of the tavern's social function, but it also made financial planning nearly impossible. The golden age of ancient Greek taverns didn't last forever. As Greek civilization evolved and eventually was absorbed into the Roman Empire, the tavern culture changed too. Roman drinking establishments were more formal, more regulated, and less socially integrated than their Greek predecessors. The rise of Christianity also played a role in tavern culture's decline. Early Christians were often critical of drinking establishments, seeing them as centers of moral corruption and social decay. While this criticism wasn't always fair, it reflected changing attitudes toward alcohol and social behavior. Political changes affected taverns too. As democratic institutions weakened and authoritarian governments took control, the freewheeling political discussions that made taverns special became dangerous. Taverns that had once been centers of political debate became places where people went to forget about politics entirely. Economic changes also played a role. As trade networks expanded and cities grew more complex, the neighborhood tavern became less central to community life. People found other ways to socialize, other sources of news and entertainment, and other places to conduct business. But perhaps the biggest factor in the decline of classical tavern culture was simply the passage of time. The specific social conditions that made ancient Greek taverns special were products of a specific historical moment. As that moment passed, the taverns that defined it passed too. The disappearance of ancient Greek taverns represents the loss of a particular kind of social space that may have been unique in human history. A place where social barriers genuinely broke down, where democracy was lived rather than just practiced, where community was built through shared experience rather than shared status. The ancient Greek tavern reminds us that some of our most important social institutions have always been informal, unregulated, and slightly disreputable. They remind us that democracy is about the everyday social interactions that build community and create shared identity. The next time you're in a bar, surrounded by strangers and wondering about the people around you, remember that you're participating in one of humanity's oldest and most important social rituals. You're continuing a tradition that stretches back thousands of years, to smoky taverns in ancient Athens where democracy was born, one drink at a time, in the company of people who had more in common with you than you might think.